Hello, everybody. Welcome to the GM Week debates. Today, we're going to be asking questions to the future candidates, and it's going to be moderated by myself, Evan Wadley, the Elections Commission chairperson, Kate, the current GM, and Colleen, the current president of the union. If you guys have any questions you would like to ask the candidates, there's a QR code posted in tons of different spots around this room. And if you want to ask a question on the mic, please just raise your hand. All right.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm the current GM. I'm outgoing after my second term.
Hi, my name is Colleen. I'm the current president of the union.
And the first candidate that we're going to be talking to today is Ava Gallagher. So go ahead, Ava.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ava Gallagher. I'm running for president of the union. I'm a current co-term mechanical engineering student. Some things that I am prioritizing in my campaign is revitalizing our union hair salon, developing new affordable bookstore offerings, ensuring our clubs are well represented, building up relationships with athletics, and like all things of that nature. And I'm good for questions whenever you're ready.
Hi, Ava. As Vice President of Club Relations and previously as a voting representative of the Executive Board, can you talk about some of your accomplishments that you've achieved while in these positions?
Yeah, so I think to answer that question, it kind of has to start at the beginning of my time on the Executive Board. So I joined the Executive Board in February of 2021 as a voting representative and a member of the Business Operations Committee. And I started to get to know the policies and the ways that the board operates, and as I became more comfortable, I became more vocal on the board. And in becoming more vocal, I felt that my voice started to hold a weight in the room in discussions. And so as an executive board representative, as a voting representative, you're assigned 5 to 7 clubs. And you're tasked with overseeing those clubs throughout the academic year, but the most important time of that year is during the budgeting cycle. So in that time, you're intended to meet with your clubs and understand their operations and understand the best way that their budget can work for them. And so in meeting with those clubs, I got to see a lot of passion and care for the things that they're working towards. And I found that to be like an absolutely incredible thing. And so as I proceeded with my time on the board and got more comfortable, I started to take on higher positions. And so that included becoming Vice President of Club Relations. And so on my time on the board, between being a voting rep and now, I've advocated for my clubs. I've acted as a mediator between union admin staff as well as the club officers themselves. I've drafted new RUGP amendments. I've worked to have different events. So for example, the Union Candy Cane Hunt, the Rubber Duck Hunt that's happening right now, all things like that. And so I think that in my time on the board, I've had a lot of growth from, not really knowing a lot about student government at all to kind of having different events and meeting with clubs and being a vocal member. So I would say that those things, yeah.
Thank you. In your platform, you mentioned establishing spaces for better visibility of athletic events. Can you elaborate on what you intend to do?
Yeah, so we had our first member of athletics on the board for a while this past year, and their insight has been great in terms of, in particular, intramural sports and club sports, and I found that insight to be very valuable. And so moving forward, I think that athletic representation is really important on our board, but also really important for our union because the union is a space that's supposed to reflect all students. And so my hope is that I can build relationships with athletics. So essentially, the athletics budget formerly was under the union budget. And in 2016, it was shifted to be funded by, in part, tuition. And in doing that, it kind of divided the union from athletics and has since had that separation. So by having a member on the board this past year, we've been able to kind of discuss some things of athletics and get to know athletics in that nature. And so moving forward, I hope to kind of increase visibility in the union itself. And that would just mean like having spaces catered to athletics like bulletin boards and postering and flyers, because athletics really does build school spirit and a way of cohesion with the student body. And I think that that's really important. But also just making sure that their presence is known because they're students.
In a similar fashion, you also mentioned working with the Greek community to better establish their community. So what specific plans do you have to work with them as well as fix some of the issues they're currently facing?
Yeah, so Greek life pre-COVID, I believe in around 2018, about 23% of students were involved in Greek life. And since then, that number has gone down largely because of COVID. And so similar to a lot of clubs, Greek life is rebuilding. And to successfully rebuild, it's really important that we have great relationships between the union and Greek life, and same as the union and athletics. And so in order to rebuild that, similar to athletics, it would be something of making sure that students are aware of Greek events and things like that. So like the bulletins, the flyers, the advertising. Advertising is super, super important for those things. In addition, I spoke with the IFC president and just kind of asked him, you know, like what is something that you would like to see with the union, or what's something that we could do to help you? And essentially what he just said is to have an open communication, just to ensure that they're able to achieve their goals with the union's help.
One of the main revenue streams for the union is our collegiate bookstore. What plans do you have for bringing more attention and revenue through the collegiate bookstore to assist with our student needs?
Yeah, so the bookstore is our largest revenue stream. And so something that we've been discussing is developing new bookstore offerings. So currently, some of the spaces in the bookstore are catered to items that aren't really getting a lot of student usage or student attention. So for example, not many students at RPI are purchasing MacBooks at a rate that really warrants their presence as much in the bookstore. And so what I'm hoping to do is to develop new offerings, and what that would really look like is just working with the bookstore management staff to just say like, hey, like, you know what, like oftentimes bookstore offerings are kind of out of budget for the standard college budget. And so what would that, like, essentially what we would do is we would create new items that are that have lesser cost, and that way more students can display their school pride without concerns for monetary reasons.
So over the last few months, the executive board has been working on facilities renovations and updates. Do you have any plans for additional facility updates for next year?
Yeah, so this is something that I can't go into too much depth with yet, but the executive board has been working to push some new projects around campus through. So all I can really say is exactly what is specified on the motions that have been gone through. And the reason for that is because before these plans can really be discussed with the public in depth, it has to go through the approval of the Board of Trustees. So some of those projects would be the playhouse renovation, which was already planned and now is most certainly necessary in light of the flood situation, as well as pavilions and sports courts. And we're also hoping to build a ropes course up by Sunset Terrace, as well as do a renovation to the Rathskeller in the bottom floor of the Union so that we can establish new spaces for our clubs and organizations.
In addition to the projects that are currently in the works, do you have any, I know you talked a little bit, but do you have any other additional facility updates?
So in addition, for facility updates, so we do have a bookstore contract renewal that is coming up in the next few months, and so that contract will be giving the union a substantial amount of money to kind of reorganize and revamp our bookstore. So that is another renovation that is up and coming.
Outside of these ones that are currently in progress, do you have anything that you think would be good to get started on? Places that you look at that you go like, oh, well, you know, this could be a potential spot for new facility investment?
Would that be specific to the union itself?
You can answer for the union or outside of the union.
So something that we've been in discussion is that sometimes our union is not large enough to accommodate all of the clubs and organizations that we have and to accommodate enough spaces for students to study. And so what we've very briefly discussed, but not too in depth, kind of just in like very early stages, is potentially expanding the union building itself But that would be something that we would have to really start working towards over the course of several years. But there's kind of some discussion about that at this point.
What changes do you think are necessary to create a more transparent environment for clubs in relationship with their reps and SARPs?
Yeah, so to kind of provide a little bit of background, so part of the executive board's work, as I described earlier, is that we have voting representatives that represent 5 to 7 clubs throughout the academic year. And so that representation is super, super important. And in that representation, transparency is super important. So these e-board reps are tasked with kind of guiding these club officers along in their budgeting processes and throughout the academic year. And so the transparency is super, super important. So what has to be done moving forward is that when students get to campus, I would like to have the representatives have a meeting with their club officers right off the bat as soon as they get here to kind of just have like a little informal meet and greet and just say like, hi, like tell me about your club, tell me about like yourself, kind of just establish a nice relationship. And then representatives are expected to also meet with those clubs again at the activities fair to kind of like just go up to them. And a similar thing, something I used to say to my clubs is, oh, like as I came up to them, oh, like give me like a 1-minute pitch of like your club and why I should join. And then after that, clubs should be having regular budgeting meetings with them as well to prepare their budget for the budgeting weekend. And then moving forward after that, the communication is super important because there are deadlines that come along. So like the deadlines for dues, deadlines for large purchases, things of that nature. So increasing that transparency really comes down to just making sure that our reps are active in working with their clubs and keeping them accountable to be fulfilling the roles that they're expected to fulfill.
Can I ask a follow-up about that? What do you think are the best ways that SARPs can communicate to club leaders? And what do you think are there any differences in the way that maybe an executive board rep that's a student would be communicating to their club leaders?
Yeah, so I think that there's kind of an inherent difference in that relationship because when you're students, those relationships are kind of more so peer-to-peer. It's like, yes, you have a peer that's kind of guiding you along, but whereas a SARP you kind of view as a little bit of a higher individual in a way. And so I think that those relationships are a little bit more professional in that sense. But nevertheless, SARPs are expected to have that similar constant communication that e-board reps are expected to have.
What do you believe are some of the biggest issues currently being faced in the union, and do you have a plan to address them? And this doesn't have to be facilities specific, it could be anything with our union.
Yeah, so one of the issues with the union, it does pertain to facilities actually. So we have been seeing some issues of like pipes leaking in the union, which has kind of rendered some issues for clubs and organizations in terms of their storage spaces. And that is a huge issue because suddenly if we have leaks and things of that nature in those club spaces, that could make those items in that space unusable. And so I've spoken to Dr. Potts about this to kind of evaluate the state of those piping systems and see a way that we can rework them. And so Potts now is working with professionals to kind of evaluate that situation and how to move forward to make sure that those spaces are safe for our clubs to use for their items.
What changes do you plan to make to the executive board that are different from the way I currently run the executive board?
Yeah, so I want to start off by saying that I feel Colleen has really done a great job with the board. She came in at a transitional year for the Institute overall and has done a remarkable job. That being said, I think that Colleen has a very loyal and kind personality, which I feel makes things difficult when it comes to accountability. And so I can recognize that it is very important to be kind and loyal and things of that nature, but it's also important to recognize when there are representatives or officers that are not fulfilling their obligations and to make that known and kind of evaluate the situation as it progresses to kind of say like, hey, like let them know like, hey, you're not like doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I will not be tolerating that if elected. I will not be tolerating any issues with our board and our clubs. It is very important that our members are doing things properly and procedurally. In addition, I also think that we had a bit of board turnover this year that was a little bit foreseeable. We had a lot of people that graduated in December, and we had a lot of people that went on the arch semester for the spring. And suddenly that left our board in a little bit of an unstable state. More specifically, it meant that we had a lot of freshmen and sophomores on the board that weren't exactly ready to step into those higher positions on the board as being an officer or a VP. And so moving forward, I just want to ensure that we have, for every committee, we have a chair, but we also have a vice chair, to someone that can shadow them and just kind of take on the position should they have to leave or anything like that.
I have a follow-up on that. So there's kind of two conflicting, potentially, issues here. There's the first of low membership across not just student government, but also all clubs that we've seen, and low engagement in those positions, and then also cases where you have people who are holding a position but not necessarily doing their job the way that they should be or fulfilling the responsibilities of that office. So how do you handle that situation where you want to keep people engaged, you want to keep membership up and retain your members, but you also don't want people to be able to hold a role and not do anything in that role?
Yeah, so for engagement, so clubs in general have seen a lot of decrease, and the executive board has seen as well in student involvement. And so I think that one of the culprits of that would be just visibility, which is a very, very simple fix, I feel, to some of these issues. Because students would love to be involved with things on campus, but they don't really know where to go or where to be involved and where their interests lie until they see something like a poster or something of that nature and just say, oh, hey, like that's actually really interesting. Like let me look into something like that. And in doing that, it's also important that when meeting and appointing our reps, that they very clearly understand their expectations and the tolerance that is structured in those positions. So more specifically, I think that it's really important that we tell representatives, this is everything that's expected of you, and you need to be fulfilling this as written. And I think that there's like a little bit of leniency, you know, sometimes students get busy or things like that, and I can understand that. But at some point, you reach a point where it's not tolerable anymore. And so I think that that's really important, that there are very clear guidelines set forward when they're taking these positions, and that those guidelines are maintained.
So as COVID restrictions have lessened this year and clubs are increasing their level of operations and membership, how do you intend to ensure a transparent and smooth budgeting process to match this level of engagement?
Yeah, so that goes back to ensuring that our e-board representatives are actively meeting with their clubs. And so we're in kind of the first year since COVID where things are in a way back to normal. Not fully, but I'd say most of the way. And so moving forward, it's super important that that transparency and that open communication is maintained between the e-board reps and the SARBs and the club officers, because that in itself makes sure that we have a smooth budgeting process. Yeah, it's a brief answer, sorry.
So the executive board obviously is, or the president of the union is overseeing the executive board, the GM oversees the Senate. How do you foresee the Senate executive board relationship progressing? Do you think there's anything that can be improved on? Do you like certain aspects of the way that it has happened in the past since you've been here for a little bit?
Yeah, so I think for a little while there has been a little bit of a divide between the Senate and the executive board for reasons that I honestly don't know. Maybe it could come down to that, you know, students that are involved with student government kind of will jump between boards and maybe something of that nature, not really sure. And so I'm expecting that we'll have a very healthy relationship moving forward with the Senate. The e-board and Senate are meant to work together to better the student experience. The e-board more in particular to the union itself, and the Senate more in particular to campus issues. But sometimes it's really important to get more student input and be involved with each other's, well, not sometimes, all the time. Like we as student government are working to make a better student experience for everyone, and I think that those relationships are super important to ensure that healthy and great student experience.
So as we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, student engagement in student government has been a little low. Do you have any plans to increase this kind of engagement besides just visibility and create a more welcoming organization?
Yeah, so in addition to visibility, I think that students would, visibility is the most important aspect to it, but I also hope to, well, I guess visibility is the largest component, because like that visibility, I would say, is the most important thing, but also like engaging students, like maybe like while they're in the union or in like the student government suite that like may potentially be interested. But like that visibility looks a few different ways. It looks like flyers, it looks like posters, it looks like the screens, emails that go out, Instagram posts. There's a lot of different routes that can be taken, but also just having students like in student government just kind of like talking in conversation. I feel like that also brings a lot of students in because they're like, oh, like that's actually a really neat thing that you guys are working on. And when you talk to like your peers, you kind of pull them into that same involvement that you're in as well.
During our terms, Colleen and I divided things into recruitment and retention. So you've talked a little bit about recruitment and the idea of visibility, bringing people in. What would you do to address retention issues?
Yeah, so oftentimes our retention issues have honestly been pertaining to the Arch semester. So a lot of the times we get freshmen and sophomores that join the board, and then their junior year, they come in and they're ready to take on higher positions, and then they leave, and we're left with a little bit of a gap in the board. And so in terms of retention, the Arch is something that I'm not sure will go away anytime soon, and so we need to kind of take other routes in that domain. But I think retention is also built on having healthy relationships inside the board as well. It's important that our board members feel comfortable with each other, and they feel that although being on the board is a bit of a more professional space, it's also important that we are, like, of course, like friends with each other, and that we work with each other, maybe outside of the board as well, because you're gonna be happy to work with people that you're friends with, a very simple thing. And so that would just come to like better like bonding experiences, and just like ensuring that we are fostering a healthy environment between our representatives and all the members of the board.
Do you have any plans on divvying up your goals and delegating down? Like, have you thought about how you plan to see operations going on the executive board to ensure you're able to accomplish the goals you've laid out in your platform?
Yeah, so something that's like delegation is super important in a position like this, but also prioritizing the projects that are like short and long term and feasible. And so moving forward on the board in appointments, if elected, in the appointment period, it is super important that the correct person is chosen for like each job and chair and vice president and things like that. And so that I feel is that choice is super important, but also kind of establishing like hard deadlines for things as to be expected. I feel like a lot of the time our work on the board has been halted or like slowed just because there weren't like clear deadlines set forward or clear expectations. And so that would be like pretty simple things to say like, oh, like what's the status of this project? What's your next deliverable? Great, can you have it done by this date? And if they say yes, like great. And so I think that just making sure that we have expected like next steps will increase the productivity of the board.
So as a candidate graduating in December, what preparations have you thought of to ensure a smooth transition for the next PU and board operations?
Yeah, so I'm a co-term student right now, and I'll be graduating this December. And so the term of the president of the union is typically a full year term, March to March, but I'll be leaving that December. So it's gonna leave a few months of a gap between the next election. And so the process that happens there is that after a PU leaves, whether for whatever reason, the board elects a new president of the union within 2 weeks, and then that member is approved by the Senate. And so to ensure that smooth transition, it would come down to ensuring that we have members that are like able to shadow the like current PU, but also ensure that all of our clubs have a similar situation where they have like the vice presidents to the committee chairs. But like the shadowing is super important, but also just like ensuring that our board in general is ready for that transition. And so to do that, I feel that I'm prepared to make sure that like our board is ready for my departure in those next few months, because I do like, the term is long, and I feel that I have enough time to make sure that our board is ready to go. And but I also want to make sure that those people that may have an interest in fulfilling that have the opportunity to have like those higher positions of being a committee chair or a vice president or things like that, to kind of prove themselves of being ready and like worthy of the position.
So part of the process when a sitting PU leaves is that there's the most experienced vice president takes over, so the person who served the longest on the board. How will you structure your VPs to make sure that there's no implicit bias in potentially who's going to serve in that 2-week period?
Well, so the vice president in that period is the most senior on the board by time on the board itself. And so I don't think that there would be much room for bias just because of the structured nature of that transition period.
Given your shortened term, do you foresee any challenges in achieving some of your goals?
Yeah, so I don't really see too many issues with the goals I've put forward. I think that like my short-term goals are very easy to reach, and long-term goals are just inherently long-term, and they're intended to expand past my term as PU. And so I don't currently expect any issues with my goals for the term.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to thank Colleen and Kate for the wonderful questions. And now it's time for the audience question portion for everyone. If you want to ask questions to Ava, over the mic, please get somewhere visible where I can see your hand, or come up near the stage. And I'm going to start off by asking the first question from the QR code, and just cut me off before I get to the next one. Okay, so some of these questions from the audience are lighthearted, and some of them are more serious. So I'll start with a serious one, and then we'll see if the audience interrupts me, but my second one will be lighthearted. So, how will you combat inherent biases on the executive board, which might sway opinions in favor of some clubs over others?
Yeah, so something that we do on the executive board when, so we have our clubs come in, present, and this would be pertaining to motions that come forward. So our clubs come in and they present like, oh, like we'd like an additional subsidy, we'd like to reallocate, anything of that nature, anything that a club would like to do. So they'll present, and then we'll discuss it, and then they'll step out and we'll move into voting. And so in those discussions and in that voting procedure, we ask that any members of the board that are affiliated in any way with the club that is presenting step out of the room to kind of remove that bias. And so being involved would just be simple as like, have you gone to a meeting? Have you, are you in their social media channels? Like anything as simple as that means that there is a potential for a bias, and we ask that you step out of the room so that that bias is minimized.
I saw an audience question. Oh, I saw an audience question over here, and then also I think Abby's going to run a mic over to you.
Hi, you mentioned increasing club representation. Do you have any specific strategies for increasing representation both in the e-board and on campus?
So increasing representation for the clubs really means that we're ensuring that our clubs are very well represented in budgeting as well as in the room for executive board meetings. And so that representation means having that open communication, because when we get to budgeting, if you're a rep for a club and you don't know enough about that club, then you're causing issues for them, and you're not doing right by them because you are not fulfilling your obligation. You're not like knowing them well enough. And so to ensure that representation, having that open communication and transparency with the clubs is super important. And an executive board representative should know everything in that club's budget like the back of their hand. They should know like, oh, our club does this event in this month, and and so they need all these things for it, and this is why. Like, they need to know that, like, cut and dry, like, easy, because that is super, super important in our budgeting, because oftentimes if we have issues with budgeting where, you know, we maybe need to cut back a little bit of money, those representatives are expected to know, like, is there a priority list to the things that they're asking for? So in that way, the representation is super, super important. And to do that would just come down to ensuring that open communication and transparency.
Hi, I know you said that you weren't, this wasn't like one of your most higher up goals, but you did mention this. I wanted to know what expanding the union building itself would look like.
Did you say what expanding the union building looks like?
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that's kind of in like a very early discussion period. So what we're currently looking into is that the union mortgage will be paid off in 2025. And so moving forward, what we're kind of looking at is, okay, well, at that point, is there something else that we would like to do for the union itself? And so what we're in discussion about very, very early, very premature. So there isn't really too much set in stone at this point. But what we've been discussing is there a way that we can expand our union in a manner that creates more spaces for students and allows like more organizations and clubs to meet? And what would that look like? That would really come down to like physically putting more, kind of like just like pushing that union back to allow more rooms in some of the sides or on like the second floor, things like that. Like I think that the pub at one point discussed having like a balcony or something like that, which wouldn't really pertain to clubs, but like we've talked about pushing the wall behind Panera back to have more space back there. We've talked about maybe shifting the bookstore around and having the bookstore space become like a study space and having the bookstore like upstairs because so it would have more like natural light and things like that. So those
Ava, can you wrap up this question so we can get to multiple ones?
Yeah.
Sorry, just time warning, 30 seconds.
No, you're good. So yeah, so we have like a whole bunch of things that we're kind of just brainstorming right now, but nothing set in stone.
So you've been in the school for about 5 years and you're doing your co-term right now, as well as working and doing a bunch of other things. Are you afraid that you're going to be burnt out by the time you're coming to the end of your term and just ready to throw it to the next PU?
Yeah, so as Abby said, so I'm involved in a few different things in RPI, but also in terms of my personal life and research and things like that. So I don't think that I would foresee any kind of burnout. I think that I really enjoyed my time on the board, and I really enjoyed my involvement in the union and the problem solving and things of that nature. And I think that I really enjoy this work, and I really care about our union and our students. And I think that like having that degree of care will make it so that I won't have any issues with burnout or things like that.
All right, so we're going to take a break after asking Ava all these questions, but we have about 5 more minutes for audience questions, and I would rather see them asked in person. So if you have a question, please come up and say it over the mic. Yeah, or raise your hand. Thank you.
Hi. I wanted to know how important are like keeping multicultural spaces for. I have a loud voice.
Yeah, so those spaces are super, super important. So as I said earlier, the union is a space for all of our students, and it should be representative of all of our students. And so we have the multicultural lounge that kind of acts as a space for multicultural students to kind of ensure like you'll always like feel comfortable somewhere in the union. That being said, the hope is that you'd feel comfortable everywhere in the union, but sometimes, you know, you feel more comfortable in certain spaces than others. And so it's super, super important to me that we maintain those multicultural spaces. That is absolutely vital. So if elected under my term, there will be no change to anything of the multicultural spaces unless in the terms of expansion, because there's no reason or need for any minimizing or anything of that nature. Those spaces are very, very important.
addition to multicultural and the rest of the student body, how do you plan on supporting grad students, seeing as they are a little bit lesser of our population?
Yeah, so for our grad students, student government has grad council, which kind of addresses grad student concerns individually, but also one of the neat spaces that we have is the Clubhouse Pub, which often caters to grad students. We have that space, as well as our clubs and organizations oftentimes have like grad students that kind of like group together. So for example, I'm a part of SWE, and like and SWE has a like group for like grad SWE. Graduate students in particular, I would say like their space would probably be more so like the pub, just because of the nature of grad students being over 21. And those grad student spaces are super important as well. And yeah.
I want to ask another question while our audience members are hopefully thinking of some other ones. The executive board has certain requirements of like, transparent, or certain confidentiality requirements. But outside of those requirements, what is your spiciest executive board take? Like your most controversial take on any topic within the executive board that you can feasibly share with us?
My spiciest take. Oh God. Okay, so it can't be budget related. That's really hard.
It can be about budgetary process, but obviously none of the numbers or any of the more confidential discussions. So,
I mean, I don't know if I would consider it very spicy, but something that I've been looking into is food policies. And so at the moment, we have a few different policies that I'd like to kind of hone in on and evaluate to see if they're really working for our clubs in the best way that they can. So, for example, we have a policy that for a specific identity-based event, you can get, I believe, up to $500. Yes, $500 for this one specific identity-based event. And so moving forward, I think that should be 2, just to kind of ensure that you can have one of those events like per each semesters, like for the fall and spring semester. So I guess that's not really super spicy, but also something that I've been looking into is the one-time travel food policy. And so essentially what that says is that if you are like a club or organization that's going outside of a 30-mile radius from the RPI, you can get a subsidy of a certain amount per activity fee paying member, up to $300 for one specific event. And I think that policy had a good intent behind it, but needs to be reevaluated kind of to work better for our traveling clubs.
On the topic of food, before we take one more audience question, I'm going to ask one from the QR code. And it's lighthearted. Okay. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Defend your position.
You guys might hate me for this. I think I support pineapple on pizza because because you know what, like you have like your pizza, which is kind of salty, and the pineapple gives a little bit of a nice like sweet balance, but it also gives you a little bit of, I don't want to say hydration, but like it's like a nice liquidy combination. So I'm in support. It's like liquid. It's a pineapple. It's fruit.
Keep a little bit of the peace, folks. If I had a gavel, I would bang it. There's time for one more audience question. Abby, if there's another audience, I think I see somebody back there who wants to ask something. Could you bring the mic to, I think it's Raymond?
So, eBoard also helps with affiliating and recognizing clubs of the union. So, what is your position on affiliating or recognizing clubs that are also part of national organizations? It can be anything from, sports that want to affiliate with the national sporting organizations, or it could be political clubs affiliating with their national divisions. What is your position on that? Or even Greek life, New Greek life, if that ever happens.
Yeah.
What is your position on that?
Yeah, so I think that those kind of situations have to be evaluated on a case by case, because we can kind of look at a club and its members, but we also need to be recognizing what the national organization stands for and if it aligns with the values of our union. And so if say for example, like if we had a national organization that was pushing students to do like bad things, then I think that that's a huge issue. But if we have a national organization that's like overseeing like a healthy relationship between their like clubs on each campus, then I think that of course that is absolutely fine.
Okay, we're gonna take one more audience question. Before we do, we're gonna have a candidate for the undergraduate president position and the current undergraduate president come here, and we're gonna have questions for her later. But before that, we're gonna take a short break, and we're gonna invite the current Grand Marshal and the current president of the union up for a GMPU roast. So yeah. Ava, no, sorry. Abby, do you want to ask the last question? Okay.
If you have to yell.
As the last question for the night, for you, Ava, how do you feel about the union going 24/7 again, and how do you feel about the union having pizza inside of it?
All right, so I'll start with the hours and then I'll move to pizza. So the union used to be 24/7 pre-COVID, and that was a great thing for students because sometimes, you know, you have to stay up super late studying, and sometimes you don't have access to things at home that you might have at the union. So 24/7 is super, super important and a great thing for our students. That being said, we've run into some complications in pertaining to that 24/7 union, and so what that essentially means is that there's concerns of safety during those late night hours when there may not be as many students in the union. And so to solve that, the solution that has been proposed by administrators is to hire a full-time staff person that can be on duty to ensure that if there is a medical emergency or anything like that, that somebody is here to attend to that person, God forbid something should happen. And of course, in doing that, that would mean being a full-time salaried position, which of course, like the salary is already expensive, but also in addition, having an extra subsidy to account for the fact that they're gonna be here overnight. So I would love to have a 24/7 union. I think that's super important. But in doing that, we need to kind of evaluate the cost of that and to see if it warrants that cost, but also if that cost is feasible for the union. And so I'm hoping to work with Dr. Potts on maybe expanding the hours, expanding the union hours to be a few additional past midnight. I think that that's a little bit more easy to do, but 24/7 at this point, there are some concerns. In addition, there was a shooting at a union, I believe in the last like month or two, and so that kind of has like raised those concerns and amplified them a bit more. And so we're kind of working to evaluate ways to potentially open for 24/7, but I think at this point the most feasible option is to expand a few hours and then kind of go from there. As for pizza in the union, on a different note, I would love to have pizza back in the union. I think a lot of students would. We've seen a lot of clubs and organizations will order pizza for like their meetings, and that money used to go to the pizza place that was downstairs, and now that money is like leaving the union to go to other vendors. And so I would love to bring pizza back, and that's very important to me. I mean, it's pizza, so it's a little bit lighthearted, but I would love to bring that back, and so I'm hoping that we can do that, and also, of course, still have like Wild Blue in the union. But like where Wild Blue is where that pizza used to be.
All right, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna take a short 5 to 10 minute break. I'd like to thank Ava for standing up to this grueling 1 hour session. So yeah, short 5-10 minute break. Hopefully Rhea will be here soon enough. And between that, we're gonna have a lighthearted GMPU roast.
Mr. 305, Flow Rider and Lunch Money. 3 Miami boys, you know what time it is. Give me the Spent 24 hours, I need more hours with you. We spent the weekend getting even, ooh. We spent the late nights making things right between us. But now
at the daylight, trying to make things right between us. And now it's all good, baby. Roll that backward, baby, and let me close. Yeah, 'cause girls like you roll around with guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Girls like you love fun and yeah, me do what I want. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. Maybe it's 6:45. Maybe I'm barely alive. Maybe you're taking my shit for the last time. Yeah. Maybe I know that I'm drunk. Maybe I know you're the one. Maybe I'm thinking it's better if you drive.
Not too long ago, I was dancing for dollars. No, it's really real if I let you be my mama. You don't want a girl like me, I'm too crazy. Where every other girl you meet is too gazy. I'm sure them other girls were nice enough, but you need someone to spice it up. So who you gonna call? Cardi, Cardi. Come and rev it up like a Harley, Harley. Why is the best fruit always forbidden? I'm coming to you now doing 20 over the limit. The red light, stop. I don't play when it comes to my heart, let's get it though. I don't really want a white horse in a carriage. I'm thinking more white horses and carriage. I need you right here, cause every time you fall, I play with this kitty like you play with your guitar.
'Cause girls like you ride around guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Girls like you love fun and yeah, me do what I want. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you.
I'ma get no be so. Girl, you won't capture my soul. I'ma get no be so. Make we one umbo. Better, bye. Better, bye. I'm loose. Even better done the para. Tonight in Josie, I'm in Josie. Won't call it for one Josie. I'm not playing with you, I'm not joking. My thought of mom is loaded. Me, you can fight, go, but I'm on molly. I'm on duty, but I'm on low-key. They want do me, they want do me. They want do me, cause they want do me. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I'm in San Francisco, jamming. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I just flew in from Miami. Peru, para. Peru, para. I'm loose. Even Peru done the para.
Pour out the bottle, I wanna level up. When I'm with you, I never get enough. Slow wine, I'm not in a rush. I can hear music when you're here. Tonight we're rolling, party till closing. Since I put the ring on the finger, it's still frozen. Love in slow motion, I wanna feel you over me, yeah. Certain magic in your eyes, yeah. Girl, I love the way you ride it. And it happens every time you arrive, that's right. Girl, I want you in my life, yeah. There's a heaven and it's right here. I will never leave your side, stay tonight. When you won't see me, I'm in West London this evening. Giving me the feelings, no I'm not leaving till I fly LA next weekend. Peru, nah, girl I'd rather go find somewhere quiet. You glow, and I get lost here in your eyes. I'ma gain all be so, girl you just capture my soul. I'ma gain all be so, make me wanna just take you home. Peru, para. I'm loose, even better done the para. Better, para. I'm loose, I don't run out of time, can someone call a referee? Cause I just need one more shot, have forgiveness. I know that I made those mistakes maybe once or twice. And by once or twice, I mean maybe a couple of 100 times. So let me redeem on myself tonight. Cause I just need one more shot, second chances. Yeah. Is it too late now to say sorry? Cause I'm missing more than just your body. Oh, is it too late now to say sorry? Yeah, I know that I let you down. Is it too late to say sorry now?
All right, welcome back, everybody. So, we're going to go into the roast. We have two people up here with some things that they want to say. Here are the two candidates, not the candidates, sorry. Here are the current GM and PU that we're going to roast. If you have anything to say on the floor, please come up to the mic. It'll make it more personable. And last but not least, please keep profanity to a minimum, I hope. And yeah, try not to swear. Bye.
Any hoozle. So I'm Alexander. I'm the vice GM at the moment. Thank goodness I get to end that soon.
I'm Abby Golden. I'm vice president of rules and special projects, which is a huge mouthful, but I'm on the executive board. Fun stuff that is.
Well, I'm going to get started by talking about the two of these ones together. It's really hard to separate them out. Any hoozle. So, Kate, I want to start by saying that it's been great working with you. I was worried your taste in vice GM was as bad as your taste in men, but you pulled through. I should walk that statement back just a little bit with saying your taste in twinks is immaculate. All I'm saying is if you were a gay man over 6 feet, it'd still work for you. Anyway, I am digressing a little bit. Maybe I should keep this a little bit closer to the job description. I'm supposed to be talking a little bit about your accomplishments over the last 2 years. I've only worked with you for about 1 as your Vice Grand Marshal, but we've gotten a lot done. You focused a lot on communication, and I'm very glad that you've had so many strong successes in that department. I was worried that Marty was going to ghost you after hearing about your Kent State gun girl career, but he didn't. He hasn't heard about it yet. Clearly, he doesn't know. So I do think that when we do focus on communication for the next Grand Marshal, just please remember to submit your poly articles on time. I think that would be very helpful for them. I think Kate submitted, like, what, 1 on time, maybe?
Sorry to the poly. I'm very sorry if you're still here. I don't know if they are, but my bad.
Yeah, there's some truth to these. Speaking of communication, you are an absolutely terrible texter, which is really, really funny because the size of the words on your phone are bigger than the billboards I drive by. I was hoping that you'd actually respond to some of them, but you know, it's a hit or miss. I also am very thankful that I work for someone who has kind of the attention span of a goldfish. You'll forget all of this by the end of this, and when I get roasted, you won't remember anything. It'll be perfect. I should take some time to talk about Colleen. She's sitting there very quiet, very patient, ready to go. Many of you don't know her, and I think that's by design. She doesn't really talk much. But whereas Kate gives off grandma energy, Colleen has a tendency to be more of a wine mom. It's a nice dynamic for the two of them. Colleen also has a far better track record on completing her derbies on time. Kudos to you. You even get 1 sit-down meeting with Dean Afkar. I'm so proud of you. There have been a lot of parallels between the two of you. Kate may not know how to use Discord, but at least she doesn't do knitting like Colleen. Your old energy really does balance out in that way. I was hoping that I didn't have to bring this up, but Colleen, did you get your hat fitted? Because I wasn't sure that your head was going to fit in that. It's a little big for you. Anyway, sorry. Kate gets by with 1 really cool Vice Grand Marshal as well, and Colleen needs 3 vice presidents, but I don't know what they're doing, because clearly they didn't pass our budget on time. Though I guess that might be partly our fault. I would like to blame Kate a little bit for that one, but that's an afterwards conversation, isn't it? This does bring me to the age-old debate of the Senate versus the e-board. Like, which body is better, which one's amazing, and like can get all the work done? Yeah, I'll comment on them when they do something. Anyway, so I should be biased towards the Senate, but I'm really proud of the e-board for having the Keebler elf take care of all of their meetings and overseeing it for them. It's a really nice sponsorship program. So it's a really hard choice there. I do wish that the Senate e-board relationship was a bit better. We do have a bit of issues, you know, striving to balance the budget and whatnot. I am glad that we do get things done in 4 to 5 business weeks, though. It does really keep things on track and make sure that we get things finished. Maybe we'll pass a motion later. I am glad that Colleen is a model RPI student. Her and Kate share so many similarities. Both of them have dropped out of the engineering CS side of the school and have switched to the business degrees. Really fantastic. Maybe we'll see them on the hockey team later. I also love that Colleen hates data structures. As someone who used to be a CS major, switching to ITWS was a good move. Oh my gosh. And then I do think it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with both of you. And I'm curious if the audience has any nice roasts for these two. I'm sure that
I think you
some
hit them
come to
all,
mind.
like every single one. I don't think you missed a beat, man.
Don't worry, I have more. I will, of course, allow my lovely co-host here.
I'm not funny, I'm just mean. So during the debate, I was kind of giving Alex some, because, you know, Colleen, so unproblematic, so quiet. She's amazing. But she drinks too much, never sleeps, and she doesn't eat. That's the truth. That's our president. That's my president. I'm sorry, what? Nothing? Your mic's in front of you if you want to say something. Wow, teamwork. Haven't seen that ever. All right, from the crowd, who's got something to say?
The microphone is up here if any of you want it.
Yeah, that too. Can we roast him too?
Please don't get me started.
Don't get started, don't worry about it.
Now, of course, we are your vice chairs, and both of us are going to be leaving after this, so do you guys have any roasts for us? Don't hold back.
Alex, I'm not going anywhere. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, you are a baby, I forgot. Anyway.
I just want to point out that this whole room did clear out the second that you started talking.
Aww.
Look at all the tables, everybody's gone.
Yeah, that is a real big
It's a talent
problem,
of yours to clear a room, isn't it?
That's very
Sorry, I feel bad.
No, don't feel bad. I can take a hit.
You know, Abby's got something similar, though. Every meeting, she offers to read the RUGP, our guidelines and procedures, to anyone who will listen, just to see if she can get some time with anyone who will listen.
And despite being in charge of fixing the RUGP and going through the process of making an amendment, Abby reacted very confused when I told her that the GM actually does have to check the RUGP at some point in the process.
Tell me where in the RUGP says it.
Colleen, where did the RUGP say
Don't you
that?
dare ask her.
I don't know.
Wait, if you check the bylaws, why do you never abide by them in meetings?
What is that supposed to mean?
Exactly what he said.
The Senate has the right to overturn the Grand Marshal or any chair of any meeting according to Robert's rules with a 2/3 vote.
That's a fantastic point. Once we get off of the 7 Qs, then we can get to that vote. We also can talk about the agendas. Wow, is it nice to have those 10 minutes before the meeting.
Do you know that it's actually not the GM's job to send out the agenda? It's the secretary's job and also, potentially, the vice GM's job.
Delegating responsibility is really good at that. Do any of the audience members want to roast them? Please roast Kate. You can also roast the two of us.
Additionally, you can come up to the mic and we'll roast you if you have nothing to say.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's true. Uh-oh.
Come into the light.
That is a shame. There you go. All right. So starting off with you, Alexander.
Oh, thank you.
So I've never met you before last week, except for once. And you know what that one time was? It was when you were playing Europa Universalis 4. And you know what? That is the most RPI thing and the most Stugov thing I've ever seen. I am sorry, that is the most Stugov thing I've ever seen. Colleen, to you. I know we've never interacted before, but based on my, conversations with people, I heard that you are a keen political actor. And I don't know what and why does RPI need that? I've never seen anyone else act like that. But honestly, kudos to you. I wish you have a good political career. Abby, I've never met you before either. I have literally nothing about you to say because I literally never met you before.
Love you.
I am sorry. Kate. Yes. Ooh. I'm sorry, the hat does not fit you.
That's all right. That's my reaction to her, too.
Oh, also, this is from someone else in the audience. This is not what I'm going to say. This is not my opinion. This is not what I say. I want to say it, because this is what someone else told me in this audience. They have heard none of your voices before, and they frankly do not care.
That's all right. I've been told my voice is lovely.
To get back on top of the roast, Kate, I've heard a few names said about you, and I have to say my favorite that I constantly bring up is Emperor Palpatine. That was my favorite.
I could start talking about the overheards in the RPI chat for Colleen, but I think that'd ruin her image as the gray sprinkle on an ice cream sundae, Very unmemorable.
Alex, you would talk about overheards. I think your favorite thing in the whole world is to listen in on tea and make it your business.
Evan, where's the actual schedule for the GM week?
The GM week? I'm not on the GM week committee. I'm an ex officio member.
Okay, you are on the GM week committee, like by the bylaws of the GM week committee.
It's my roast of him. Shh. That he is? I don't even think he knows that.
It's okay. He doesn't know most of what's going on in student government. I'm glad he cleans up nice, at least. It's a good trait. You always got to look for the good in people. I am...
A 5-minute warning before we have to get onto the UP debates.
Oh, establishing debate limits for this as well. Wow.
Sad we have to move on, but I guess that's what we got to do.
I can always take pot shots at my favorite people in the audience who I like to make fun of. I see Fiza sitting here. Good point.
Fine. My favorite days are when you two accidentally match each other, and then you both complain to me separately that you guys are matching and how you guys are stealing each other's clothing.
My favorite days are when they actually have the officers of the union meetings so they know what's going on in the other boards. What else do I like?
Oh my God, the rats in the office.
To clarify, those are not rats.
Yeah, mice.
There is
yes, sorry.
one mouse, singular.
No. The mice in their office, because it's absolutely disgusting and there's so much food left over from a bunch of different events. They need to clean their office. There's miscellaneous shoes, there's papers. The mice is living in the desk. There's been like a half-eaten orange sitting on the table for like a month and a half. Very organized people, not very cleanly. Not in that room anyways.
True, true. I'm super glad that these two have a way better running relationship than Yassine and Kate did. Though I do think there's a common thread through that, but we'll talk about that later.
Pushovers. Pushovers. I said it. You know it. Pushovers. No, don't explain. That's just word.
I'm so glad you wore your glasses tonight. It's very beneficial for the Senate to come off as a respectable body and not led by a toe, one of those from the old show we all watched as a kid. It was about video games. I'll send it to you later.
Colleen is my StuGov Grandbag. I love this girl. She is my mentor, my everything. Love her. Her freshman year was so uncalled for. She told me earlier that she's surprised she's not dead. She walks by herself at 3 a.m. under bridges in downtown Troy. She drinks iced tea and something that I'm not going to say on stage because she's still technically PU for another few days, but it's alcohol. I'm surprised that she still has brain cells to be here and made it into the grad school. But she's still doing it at 3 a.m. because PU by day, actual student by night, food, never. Communication, never. Put together right now, after this, no, drunk. Maybe not, I don't know. That look kind of gave me something else.
That's a good point. I guess we should wrap it up. Thank you, Frat Girl Grandma and Wine Mom. It was very nice serving with the two of you. I'm so glad it's over. Do you have anything to say, Abby?
I don't think I'm going to stop when this is done.
Thanks for the roast, guys. Really appreciate it.
Ditto.
All right, so now we're going to ask some questions to Ria, who's running for the undergraduate president position and is also the current undergraduate president. It's going to follow a similar format to before, where people who know her best and who know what her board does are going to ask her questions that are specifically tailored towards that, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. Obviously, there's still the QR codes. Just make sure to select undergraduate president as the filter. And if you want to ask questions on the mic, raise your hands and I'll call on you. Thanks. Yeah, so now we're going to let Ria introduce herself for a little bit.
So, hi everyone, my name is Ria Masoni and I am a junior majoring in computational biology and science, technology, and society. I've had the pleasure of serving as your undergraduate president for the past year. And I have really been honored to be in this role and to be able to have the opportunity to make a difference here at RPI. I first joined student government sort of on a whim, just because I wanted to be able to actually make a change, and I've come to found that this place is something I really call my home, and I'm looking forward to hopefully be able to continue that as the undergraduate president for the next year. A few of the things that I've been working on this past year have been involved with the class councils and class training, revamping our training and knowledge, as well as our databases and all of our class council and undergraduate council records, and also a huge push towards the ARCH, reforming the ARCH process and making it actually more enjoyable for students. And these are things that I really want to focus on and hone in on to continue throughout the next year, especially in regards to the ARCH. Furthermore, I would love the opportunity to actually work on increasing our communication both between the class councils and within the class councils, as that's something that has always been a huge issue, and just generally getting more people involved and more people advocating for what they want to see. And so with that, I guess I will turn it over. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now the panelists are going to start.
Cool, so let's start with a question from the audience, and that would be, what does the undergraduate council actually do, and what are the extents of your responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the undergraduate council oversees all of the class councils. It's made up of all the class presidents and vice presidents, and acts sort of as both an advisory board where people can get advice, ideas, ask questions, and we also approve the budgets of the class councils when they plan events or activities for their class, but also just generally as a space for all of the class council members and the class presidents and vice presidents to meet and discuss what they are working on currently and to receive support. And so both giving advice and also overseeing the class councils, but those are the biggest things that the undergraduate council does. Now you might be asking, what does my class council do? Which is sort of related, so I'll cover that too, because it falls under it. Class councils plan all of your class events, activities, they design your class logo, class merchandise, and so the UC oversees all of that. And then as undergraduate president, my role is to oversee the undergraduate council, to help out all of the class presidents, vice presidents, and members of all of the class councils, and also to oversee all of the undergraduate events and advocate for issues that affect undergraduate students, one of those being the Arch.
Alrighty, I'll jump right into it. A major criticism of your current term that you've had would be on the way that multiple class councils ceased function during this semester, or actually this school year, I should say, the academic year. What plans do you have to change this and to ensure that class councils function more smoothly overall?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that's actually been a large issue for class councils is having people who are motivated every single semester. Class councils typically will start off with a bunch of new members and then slowly over the year whittle down to just the core few people. And as the years go on, as people go up from freshman, sophomore to junior and senior, less and less people are getting involved. And so part of that we'll be focusing on actually getting more people involved in their class council. Just getting more people to go to a meeting, it's 1 hour a week, will be a huge improvement for the class councils, as now they have an extra voice and an extra person who can give ideas and offer help to the class council. And so that is something I plan to focus on. And the other big thing I plan to focus on is being more involved myself. So this past year, I've sort of sat back a little bit and let the class councils do as they would like to, and didn't really step in too often unless it got super dire, where class councils really started to fall apart. And so this year, if elected, I plan to actually be more active and more involved, going to class council meetings regularly, checking in with the class presidents and vice presidents outside of the undergraduate council, just to make sure that things are running smoothly and that there's no additional support that they really need. And if there is additional support, of course, I'll offer that or direct them to the resources. We have a bunch of them within the union, but those are the major things that, if elected, I plan to do.
So the Arch has been a major focus of your term. What concrete achievements do you believe the Arch Task Force has made this year?
Yeah, so the Arch Task Force has actually accomplished a lot this year. Starting off in the fall semester, we were actually able to get on-campus research approved as an away experience. So now students on their away semester can stay on campus and do research if they would like to, which was something that wasn't allowed in previous years. Another big thing with the Arch has been actually getting our hands in the conversation. So prior to this year, the administrators haven't been very open or willing to listen to students, but now beginning this year, we've had monthly and bi-weekly meetings with various administrators, specifically those related to the Arch. We meet with bi-weekly, and just having that open and direct line of communication has been a huge improvement, because we've had the platform to actually offer up all of our ideas, the things that we've heard and feedback we've gathered from students about what they want to see from the Arch. And so now going forward, a few other things. We worked with the CCPD to actually restructure the entire Arch prep course, which will hopefully go into place for next year. And we also are working with both them and the registrar to actually figure out how to offer the Arch prep course earlier on, so that way students are prepared for when they are actually searching for their away experience, as well as making those prep courses more targeted towards what kind of away experience you might want, and one that's a little bit more specific to your major, which wasn't offered before. And then in terms of the Arch summer, we've been improving both housing, summer class schedules, summer programming, a whole bunch of different stuff. And I won't go into all the details because I know that I'm supposed to stick to time limits is what I've heard. So I won't go into all of that, but those are the major things.
This one's going to be more conceptual. The undergraduate council, typically it's referred to almost disparagingly as the party planning committee. Do you believe that that is the only aspect of the undergraduate council's duties that it should perform, or do you believe that there's more to it and that it should take a bigger role in student issues across campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know I've heard it throughout my years here. I'm sure many people too have too, that the UC tends to get a rap for being the party planning committee because we plan events and activities, but that is not merely all that goes on behind the scenes. There's so much more that goes into it. One of the biggest parts for the UC front has been with the Arch, as that's something that does affect all undergraduate students, and I do believe that that is an area that we expand upon, those events and traditional activities that the UC is responsible for. And the class councils themselves also have a little bit of an advocacy role to play. They, while they do have class senators on their council, they can also discuss issues as a class council that affect their class council members directly. And so if there are things that are really only affecting their class, then that could be something that they discuss and actually advocate for and act upon. If it's something that's a little bit larger of an issue, then of course the class senators would be tasked with bringing that to the student senate. But there is an opportunity there for the class councils and the undergraduate council to go beyond just planning those traditional events and activities that we're responsible for.
So we do have an audience question that's a little bit more of a, I believe, clarification that you might want to give. So the question is, wasn't the Arch Task Force absorbed by the administration? Why was it allowed for a student committee to be taken by the administration?
Yeah, so the Arch Task Force is a committee on the undergraduate council. It's not at all full of any administrators or anything like that. We just meet with the administrators, and so we're a student body that is actually focused on advocating for what students want to see with the Arch. I'm thinking the confusion might lie with we're a part of this past fall semester, the Arch Town Hall, which is a yearly retreat that they have every year to go over all different issues with the Arch, things that they want to improve. And so that was the bigger portion where we got involved with a bunch of different council members. And some of the students on the Arch Task Force are involved in committees that the administration has related to the Arch, but the Arch Task Force itself is all students and student run.
So this one's kind of fun, just like with Ava's. So pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Defend your position.
So I might get thrown off the stage for this, but I will say that I do enjoy some good pineapple on pizza. I know that it is not the most popular thing, but I've actually grown up. The only pizza I knew growing up for like the first maybe 8 years of my life was Hawaiian pizza, so ham and pineapple, not like the pepperoni that you New Yorkers do, because that's weird. Yeah, so pineapple on pizza is definitely a solid choice of mine.
Thank you for that.
What do you believe your goals for the undergraduate council moving forward will turn into?
Yeah, so my biggest goal is actually to see more collaboration between the class councils and more cross-council events. So this isn't something that happens too often unless the undergraduate council is the one planning the event, but one of the goals that I haven't touched on is really allowing the class councils to have that space to meet and interact with one another, because typically only the class presidents and vice presidents interact, and from there they can take ideas back to their council. But instead, allowing the class councils and providing that space for them to do so will hopefully turn into a bit more cross-council collaboration and cross-council events. So there's tons of different things that councils can do, and a lot of the time they end up doing smaller things just because they might not have enough people for a particular day of the week, or maybe they want to save a little bit of their money for something else. But by collaborating with the other class councils, I'm hoping that that can turn into something great where class councils are actually able to hold more events and of a larger scale. So that's one of the goals that I have for the undergraduate council. Another goal that I have for the UC is also, I've touched on it a little bit, in terms of communication within the councils and outside of the councils. So a lot of people don't know what goes on in the UC or within their class council unless they show up to a class council meeting. And so one of my goals is actually to start sending out, making sure we have UC-specific newsletters that are written by the class council members for their council. So they can talk about the upcoming things that they're working on, talk about, when their meetings are, what projects they are, what help they're looking for, and all that sort of stuff. And it'll also be a place for people to raise concerns or issues maybe that they see within the undergraduate student body. So if a class has a certain concern and want to get feedback or advice about something to hear if other students share that same concern, then that could be a place for it. And so that is something that is also one of my goals that I haven't said just yet.
A follow-up question. This one is not necessarily in the same vein, but it is really important. Recently, we've had the COVID-19 pandemic come to an end. I'm curious, do you have any plans to work on bringing traditions that have long been gone back to campus? And what changes do you plan on making to campus traditions, seeing as the seniors will graduate soon and they're the last class to have been here before the pandemic?
Yeah, so the undergraduate council is responsible, well, through the class councils, for a lot of different traditions around campus, and there's lots of different ways that we actually plan to revive some of those traditions. A lot of them we still sort of do, but they don't have that same might that they used to and that same impact, and it really all starts with freshman year, kicking it off with the class tree ceremony. It used to be something that was a super huge event. Tons of people used to attend. It used to be not exactly the same level as GM Week, I'd say, but back in the day, it was a pretty big thing. That is something that I'd really like to revive. Another thing is also the class rings. This is something the class councils still do, but still don't have as much of the same sort of impact that they used to. Class councils actually get to design their own class rings. And not many people really know that you can design it yourself, which is something that's really cool. And so just making sure that we're carrying out these sorts of traditions, but also that we're bringing back the larger sorts of events that we used to see around campus. Some of those bigger ones used to be at the end of the semester. All of the class councils would get together and they would have, well, we've turned it now into floats and finals, but they used to have milk shook in finals was a huge thing. They'd actually have it in the entire McNeil room, giving out milkshakes to everyone who came. There'd be loud music playing, free fries, and all of the class councils would sponsor that. And so making sure that, we're not losing touch in our roots and those larger traditions that we've sort of lost, and incorporating them into the traditions that we still have now.
So the next one's a question from the audience, and there was recently a planning convention the class councils went to. What new things can we expect to potentially come to campus?
Yeah, so this past fall, I attended NACA, the National Association for College Activities. I think that's what it stands for. But basically, it was this whole event planning really workshop and also showcase. We got to see a ton of different vendors and a ton of different acts, musical showcases, and got a ton of great ideas for different events that we can have on campus. And so all of that information has actually been shared with the class councils, is being used by the class councils as they plan their events. And some of it, hopefully, will be used by the UC. But in particular, I know a class council took the idea to have a drive-in movie and is working on potentially planning that for this upcoming summer semester. There have also been other ideas like having, a glow party. There was, casino night. There were tons of different vendors and things there that we got to make connections with and really get to see in person, which is something you actually don't get to see. And a lot of those things you've also kind of seen through some of the GM Week events, which, while not class council related, another example is that the signs that they had yesterday I heard about here at the Union where they could print your own. That was something that we connected with a vendor there. And so there was a lot that we got out of it and a lot that the class councils can use. So hopefully some more class council members will be able to attend next year and use that information even more.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to the floor. If anyone from the audience has any questions that they would like to ask Rhea pertaining to the undergraduate council, please come up to the mic. Remember, you can also go to the QR code if you would like to type one in. And raise your hands.
Alrighty, I'll ask a question if you like. Oh,
Can you elaborate on how you negate any bias or conflict between being the undergraduate president and your personal relationships?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I feel like that I am a pretty open person and open about, who I'm friends with and all that sort of stuff. And I sort of keep that kind of separate from being the undergraduate president. It's not something that I really let affect my role or any of the other roles within student government. And I don't think that there has ever really been an issue with that has arisen, because I like to keep that part of my life sort of separate outside of student government, and so that way there's no bias that really comes into any of my decisions or any of the things that I am doing.
alrighty. Well, I will ask you, if student concerns come up, can students who are undergrads come to the undergraduate council directly, or should they go to their class council first? And if it does affect the wider student body, should they go to their undergraduate council first, or just straight to their class council?
Yeah, so if students, maybe recognize that this issue is something that's going to affect the wider student body beyond just undergraduates, so grad students as well, then the best thing to do is actually go to either their class senators or to the student senate itself, as they are the advocacy body focused on that. But if it's a smaller issue, maybe that only affects undergraduates, they are more than welcome to come to the undergraduate council. Even if it's only a class-wide issue, they are still welcome to come to the UC, where actually their class representatives, their class vice president and president will be there, and so they will be able to actually discuss those issues and any concerns that they have. And then from there, the members of the undergraduate council also know or have a general idea at least of what the other bodies of student government are working on, the other committees, and if appropriate, can actually bring those concerns there to the people who might already be working on such things. And so the UC is definitely an open place for all people to come if you have any concerns or issues, but I will say a lot of the time it does end up going to the Senate.
I have received another concern that just popped up. Specifically, this is in regards to graduation, which is a class-specific event. The senior class council is no longer going to be a class council soon, as the elections are going to be coming through. But a lot of seniors are very disgruntled with the fact that we've decided to move forward with 4 graduation tickets instead of the 7 that was pre-pandemic. I do know that that was probably done to standardize between the rain venue versus the non-rain venue. But can you comment on how students who are affected by this should go about looking for a solution?
Yeah, so this isn't an issue that I've actually heard too much about. I did hear it mentioned a little bit, maybe a week or two ago, about some students who are concerned about getting tickets for their families. And so if you do have those concerns, please come and talk to us. Both the senior class council has been working super hard to plan things for graduation and all of the events leading up to that, and they're actually working alongside all of the administrators who make those sorts of decisions. And also, as undergraduate president, I have typically bi-weekly or monthly meetings with Dean Apcar, the Dean of Students, and those sorts of places are a great place to actually bring up those larger concerns about things, as a lot of the time they maybe don't recognize how many people issues like only allowing students to have 4 graduation tickets really do affect the students. And so if you do have those concerns, which now that you've brought it up, I can definitely talk about it, but definitely talk to either your class council members or to the UC are some of the larger ways, and we can get you in contact with the right administrators and make sure that your voice is heard.
Okay. Yeah, you can go.
So a lot of your platform is talking about ARCH or training the new class. A lot of that has hopefully been accomplished in your previous term. What new accomplishments do you plan on doing this upcoming term that are different from the ones that you've done in the past?
Yeah, so I will say things with the ARCH are always ongoing. There are a lot of things with the ARCH that aren't really said and done or aren't something that we can just do within a single year. And also the same goes for class councils themselves. Every year there is a new class and there are new ideas and new ways to actually invite that new class council in and train them. And so there are still a whole bunch of ways that we can improve there. But one of the bigger things that I actually don't think I've mentioned that I'd like to focus on was actually an idea that someone had mentioned to me maybe a couple months ago about actually reaching out and connecting students with alumni, whether it be as students are preparing to graduate or as they are getting ready for their Arch Away semester and are looking for jobs and opportunities. There are different alumni networks that exist to and are more than willing to actually help students, whether that be just to review a resume or maybe to have a chat about maybe your career goals or aspirations. And a lot of people have actually talked about this a little bit last fall, and it wasn't something that we really got to work on at all, just because of all of the other great ideas and things that have come up. And so that is something I'm also hoping to work on and accomplish this year that is completely separate from this past year.
It says, what is your relationship with the 4 class presidents, and how do you plan on improving and strengthening this relationship after the election is over?
Yeah, so I think my relationship with the 4 class presidents is pretty good. We meet, not only weekly as the UC, but I'm also talking with the class presidents about what they're doing, checking in with them, and making sure that things are going smoothly. But going forward, I would I'd really like to actually do more UC bonding and do more fun stuff outside of student government, as my relationship this past year has been mostly strictly focused on student government, and I think a lot can get done when you become closer and get to know people a little bit better, which having some of those more fun bonding events outside of our typical UC meetings might be a great place to actually get those sorts of, or to create those sorts of relationships. Sad.
So one officer leading to another, I feel like I've learned a lot from sitting in this role as Colleen. So what is one lesson you think you learned from being UP that you will then apply to your next term that you think without that experience you couldn't possibly learn?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think one thing that I've really learned is that everything really comes down to communication. And while being class president, you're still managing a whole bunch of different things. You're doing a whole lot in your class council is. It's not in the same sense. You're really only responsible for those people in your class and not so much beyond that. But being undergraduate president and being open to actually listen to people of different classes, actively seeking out people of different classes of all undergraduates is something that I've have done this past year, but just being open for that communication, and then also the communication within the class councils, listening to the class council members. You sort of sometimes have to read between the lines in ways, and making sure that I'm really checking in and not just relying on them to come to me, but also me to go to them, and making sure that that communication is established and they're willing to actually talk about the things that they might need help with. Is something that I didn't really experience as much with before as class president or vice president, as a lot of the things that we were doing didn't involve the same level or need for the same level of communication as being the undergraduate president does. And so I think that is the biggest thing I've learned, is that I need to, make myself more available and be out there and going to these people and so that way they eventually, when they do need help, will be more willing and more likely to actually come to me for the help and support that they do need.
All right, so we have 5 minutes left. I'd like to take any last questions from the audience. Again, the QR code, or come up to the mic. If not, I think some of our panelists might have final remarks, and then I'll toss it back to Rhea for her closing remarks.
You've talked a lot about working with other individuals on the class council and the projects that have been successful under you. On a personal level, do you find any of them to be your own personal successes that are mixed among these? Or is there something that stands out that you've personally spearheaded that you would like to discuss?
Ooh, that is a good question. I already mentioned it before, but getting the invitation to the Arch Retreat is something that I personally was able to accomplish and something that I'm super proud of because it hasn't really been done before. And just pestering, I should say. I don't think that's the right word, but sort of being very adamant and advocating for the concerns that have been brought up with the Arch really actually led to that moment. And so being there and being able to present before a member of every single department on campus and tell them about my own experiences with the Arch, about other students' experiences and struggles, that is something that I am super proud of and was able to spearhead myself. So, yeah.
All right, if we have no more questions, I'd like to thank Rhea for standing up and listening to all the 30 minutes of questions we had for her. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today, and I'd like to give Rhea a round of applause. Thank you to the show techs. Thank you to RPI TV and WRPI for being here.